Andrew Turner to introduce this report.
Yep, happy to do so. There's one Part A item on the report, which is a relatively procedural matter. Back in April of this year, the committee and council approved a grant for the Westhaven Apartments building. Picture in the report, it's a building that's familiar to most of us, I would imagine. Since that grant approval was given, the building has changed hands. The main difference is that the proposed future use of the building is now a commercial use, whereas at the time the grant was made it was a residential use. The external Art Deco form and detailing, including the metal windows and the existing feature entrance doors on Montreal Street, will be retained. So our understanding, and we asked some questions of staff at the committee, is the external appearance of the building will be retained despite the use will be commercial rather than residential. There was a question around signage that came up at the committee that heritage staff weren't able to respond to, as that's a planning rather than a heritage matter. The building changed hands in an as-is, where-is contract, so the building in an as-is, where-is state. Again, we spoke to staff at the meeting around the implications of that, and it was suggested, and there's certainly an argument, that the new owner, in as much as the new owner isn't holding the insurance contribution, is making a greater private contribution to the refurbishment and maintenance of the building than the previous owners would have done had they been applying the insurance funds to it. So the committee recommendation was to approve the change in scope and to maintain the grant funding. So that's the only Part A. The only other issue that I would make reference to from this report is item 12, memorandum around leasing houses for the homeless. This came directly as the result of a forum on homelessness that precipitated some work. We've got a report, item 19, on today's agenda, and I'd just like to note the speed at which this work has been done and commend staff for the speed at which this has all happened, and also acknowledge the input of councillors Buck and Livingstone in doing what they've done to enable this to progress so quickly. But we'll be dealing with the substantive matter in item 19 in today's agenda. Right,
and you'll move the recommendation on...
I'm happy to move the committee recommendation on the Part A matter, yep.
And do I have a seconder? Glenn Livingston. Is there any questions or comment? Yanni?
Thank you. I just wanted to place on record, and you can see from the voting around the change of scope of works for the Westhaven Apartments building. Just wanted to express real concern that if we want people living in the central city, then rezoning some of the best residential land into commercial, or enabling that through provision of these sorts of grants really concerns me. I think, I was really happy to support this going into keeping the heritage fabric and becoming residential or continuing with residential apartments. I'm really concerned that we are somehow encouraging the change from residential to commercial in this building, and therefore I wasn't happy to support this change. So I just wanted to place on record my concern and the reason why I voted against this.
Yep, Pauline, then Jamie.
Thank you. Yeah, I can understand your concern, Yanni. I wonder if we have much choice in the matter, that's all. But my question was, I don't know, Andrew, did anybody ask if there's any heritage items in the interior, any staircases or any other features that need to be protected? My mind goes back to the Beaths building scenario.
Yeah, that question did come up in the committee, and we weren't able to get an answer as to exactly what was proposed, but the focus was on the maintained external appearance of the building as the contribution, I guess, to the public good and the public realm, and that was the part that there was the most interest in.
Jamie?
Thanks. I wasn't going to speak to it, it's quite straightforward, but Yanni just wanted to reiterate his opposition around it. I'll reiterate why I'm supporting it. This is called the Central City Landmark Heritage Grant. It's not the Central City Residential Grant. We actually do have something to incentivise that, and that's the Central City Residential Development Contributions Rebate. The whole purpose of this grant is to ensure that we have Central City landmarks with heritage qualities retained. It was the only thing worse than not being able to save a beautiful, historic, landmark, iconic heritage building is to save a beautiful, iconic, landmark heritage building and for it to be demolished by neglect because it doesn't financially stack up. Unfortunately, that was the path that was going to go down. The previous owners found that and were unable to make it work. A new owner came in, he's going to be tipping money, he's going to be able to save this building with the grant that was previously allocated for the purpose of retaining these buildings. So I think it would be a terrible precedent to then whip the carpet out from underneath the feet of this person who's going to be able to do exactly what the council wanted by setting up this grant in the first instance. So it's not going to be demolished by neglect because it has no use. They found a way to make it financially fly, and I think that should be applauded. So, of course I'm supporting it.
Paul?
I'd echo Yanni's comments around, trying to keep and try and encourage people to come back and live in the inner city, because that's something I do firmly believe in. However, this is a heritage, recognisable landmark building, and I want to see it survive. And sometimes for these buildings to survive, they need to convert their use to actually enable that to happen. And I'm actually heartened with the Ngātahu development, which is straight across the road, which is going from commercial into half a residential. So from that respect, I think there's a bit of balance that needs to be put in place. As I say, I want to see this building retained. It's a beautiful building. It is one of those landmarks which we don't have many of them left, unfortunately, post-earthquake. So I'll be supporting this landmark grant.
Yeah. Oh, Andrew.
I'll just speak to the comments that have been made. I mean, whilst I understand the sentiments of Councillor Johansson's comments, the issue of balance between residential and commercial use of buildings in the city is a far wider and bigger issue than a conversation about just one building. And I look at this as an opportunity for us to assist in the presentation, the preservation and retention of that building. And it's in that context that I'm supporting this today. So yes, there is a wider issue around encouraging people to live in the city, but we're not going to be able to handle that by a decision on one building. I'm more keen to see this preserved, and that's the reason I'm supporting it.
Yeah, no, I'm going to support the motion as well. I think I've said before that I used to live in the West Avon apartments in the bottom left-hand flat, and it certainly is a wonderful asset to our city. I was disappointed that it's no longer going to be available for residential, but I agree with I agree with Yanni in that respect, but I also agree with Jamie that the one thing that would be worse would be to see it demolished and no longer part of our landmark heritage, and I think that would be a tragedy. And as Paul has commented, there is a lot of residential development going to happen once that police building disappears, and that's going to really enliven this part of the city, and I think it's going to make a huge difference. So I'm in favour of it. There's just one other thing though, that there was a comment in it that just did a little alarm bell for me, the as-is, whereas state with no insurance funds for repairs. That means that the previous owner took the insurance money that was settled for a residential, and it just reminded me that we've got houses throughout Christchurch where the residential component they've taken the settlement, and that there is no mechanism in place to record whether the repairs are actually done for cash settlements. So I'm alerting people to this because, and I don't want to be alarmist. People know that I'm not that sort of person, but this could be the leaky building crisis of 20 to 30 years' time if people don't keep good records. So I think that the kind of warning is that when you're in the market and you're buying a house, you're going to have to know whether the repairs are done or not. It's not our role to keep that record, but I have asked that the Chief Executive look into this because I think it is a risk issue. I'm not going to take any more because I'm sidetracking, and that's because I'm the chair and I can do that. But I'm just making the point that it is something that we need to be alert to as a risk that could face the city in the future in terms of the range of cash settlements. But I just make the point that when people are in this market, it will be very easy for the first sale and purchase, but it's going to get more difficult as the transactions distance themselves from the event. So memories don't stretch that far, we know, because we keep repeating the mistakes that we've made over time. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And Andrew and Glenn will move and second that the report as a whole be adopted. And I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And then we've got City Care land drainage contract.